Is a multinational.
Five guys in sandals. Earth first. You run nothing. You're a joke. You're funded by the globalists. I know you won't admit that. Losing's too important for you. Being scammed is always the object of, being a chump. But I'm giving you the facts here, and Dr. Begich is giving you the facts, and they pretty clearly killed his dad over all this trying to bring out the facts. Understand, this belonged to the American people, and it was stolen. Just like they find giant clean-burning coal deposits, enough to run the whole U.S. for 200 years in Utah, and Bill Clinton says off-limits, and then they mine dirty coal in Texas, lignite, and then dump it in the plants and spew mercury and take the environmental rules off so they can burn mercury-filled coal. And the environmentalists dance around loving that, too. I mean, it's incredible.
Right. Yeah, we have anthracite here. Which is very clean burning. In fact, we used to fuel, during World War I, Alaskan coal fueled the Pacific Fleet. A lot of people don't know this. They shut them all down after the war was over. Copper, Alaska has, and there'll be a story to tell on this someday, but Alaska has huge deposits of copper. The Guggenheim family, when they owned all the copper in the country back during the 1870s and on, they owned all of it in Colorado, then they owned everything in Alaska, then they owned everything in Chile. They had a worldwide monopoly with J.P. Morgan up here. And what they left behind, because they left Alaska after not mining out the copper, it's just that labor was so much cheaper in Latin America. There were only 30,000 people living in Alaska 100 years ago when they discovered copper. And yet the copper deposit that was being mined at Kennecott was with 5 on a ratio of 15 times what they would mine per person in Montana. In other words, the copper ore was so rich at Kennecott that 15 times as much money was produced per person. They had an unbelievable discovery. Well, they left it. They left the buildings, everything, the machinery, pulled up the railroad and went to Chile because Chile had 1 million people that had their own agricultural base and they could pay them peanuts. And Alaskan labor was expensive in those days, and an egg cost 100 years ago $1. You talk about an egg costing money today; it was $1 during the gold rush era. But the thing about all of this is when you start to look at the national resources, and you look at, I'll give you another example.
It's all been locked away through phony conservation, and it's all
It's like a safety deposit box for the multinationals. They get to break it out later when the price is high enough. Why oil is so high is because the alternatives are about to come in, and the oil industry is getting as much money together in the big pile as they can because they're going to own that industry. Whatever those alternatives are, they're going to be in such a heavy cash position, buy out whoever's in the game. And that is the reason I believe they're capitalizing right now. They want to own the energy industry, whatever that looks like in the 21st century, and make sure you're stuck on a meter when the 21st century should offer us the opposite, and it does, where we shouldn't have any meters, and we ought to be totally independent in our households with energy and our businesses with energy, with the technology.
Well, I want to hear about some of those advanced technologies that they're suppressing and that they plan to own, and you're absolutely right with your research, and I know you can elaborate and teach us a lot. But this is economic warfare. They have built a society, especially in the United States and Western Europe, completely dependent on fossil fuels. With these sprawling cities and rural areas where you have to have the car. They have strategically blocked the development of other fuels and other energy platforms. And then now, as you said, they're not just getting a pile of money for investment. They state that they are now literally waging war on the population and are squeezing the middle class into extinction and transferring masses of the wealth to themselves in a predatory fashion to preposition themselves in the 21st century to fully build a corporate control grid, police state system that they call their New World Order.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think when you look at the interlocking boards of directors in these corporations, when you start to analyze the relationships politically on a national and a state level, and you watch how that whole machine operates, if people fully had disclosure, and we work with unclassified materials and put together the picture pretty clearly, but if people had full disclosure of the things that are truly not national secrets but are national embarrassments, we would be changing this government out in a dramatic way. And not to say that it should be violent or anything like that, but the fact of the matter is, the truth the truth of what has happened. And this is why the technology is so threatening to this establishment, because they recognize that, when people hear and they feel the pain of the results of this truth, which is fear of your loss of your pension, your Social Security, worry about your money in the bank and your money markets that could collapse.
And you find out it was all done predatorily by design, you're going to get mad, so they preemptively have a police state surveillance grid in place. We've got to break, but before we break, finish up the point we're making, but I want to get into the fraud of the global carbon tax, but go ahead.
Yeah, and that's another, that whole issue. The technology on the sciences, simple things on the models taught in business school are make sure you get the customer coming back. So they don't want you independent in energy where you buy something and it lasts for 20 years and provides all your power. They want something that you have to go get a meter and plug into. This is why Tesla never got his free power grid on the planet, because J.P. Morgan, the same guy that financed the monopolies of almost every monopolist at the last part of the last century, all of that was about control.
Well, the new solar systems that the cities are paying for, that the feds are paying, subsidizing a discount for you to get, hook into the grid. And then
I'll give you an example. My brother Mark is mayor of Anchorage. They have a municipal light and power. They bought gas rights from Shell Oil. They bought them out at the Cook Inlet gas field they own. So the city bought the gas rights for $1.40 per 1,000 cubic feet. And what is it today? $13. And so the ratepayers are paying this incredibly good rate in the municipality of Anchorage for power, 7 cents, I think, a kilowatt hour, on natural gas.
You're paying 1/13
to buy it.
You're paying 1/13 with what everybody else pays, and the media calls that subsidized. No, that's what it really cost.
Yeah, that's actually what it costs, and the city was smart enough to buy those rights in a commercial market. He wanted to look into selling them, right? He wanted to sell them into the marketplace, because then he could retire all the debt for the city, because it's gone up in value so much, and have a debt-free city. And the Utilities Commission won't let him do it because the ratepayers will pay too much, which I can understand too. But it's on balance. It's an interesting mix. But
here we go. We're going to skip the break. Here we go.